Testing? Yeah, there we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, we're good. I wonder why the mic got disconnected. I forgot that it does that. Kingdoms once strong, now shaken. We trust forever in your name, the name of Jesus. We trust in the name of Jesus. You're the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore you are victorious. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore you are victorious. Unmatched in all your wisdom, in love and justice you will reign. Love and justice you will reign. Every knee will bow. We bring our expectations. Our hope is anchored in your name, the name of Jesus. Oh, we trust in the name of Jesus. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore you are victorious. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore you are victorious. Lift your high. We lift the name of Jesus. From age to age you reign. Your kingdom has no end. We lift our banner high. We lift the name of Jesus. From age to age you reign. Your kingdom has no end. We're the only one King ever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore, you are victorious. The only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever. Forevermore, you are victorious. Amen. It's a bit quiet.
if you would take the time to do that, we'd appreciate it. If you fill out a Connect card, go ahead and...
Man, I am boomering it up today. I had completely forgotten to turn on the audio capture for the browser until just now.
If this is your first time here,
Whoops.
visiting with us, we want to say a special welcome to you. We have a gift for you. If you swing by our information booth out in the gym following services, we can give you that gift. It's just a way for us to say thank you for coming, thank you for checking us out. We can answer any questions that you might have. And so, yeah, this is your first time. If you're online, if you're here in person, we're just glad you're here, and thank you for being here. So there's a few things going on in the life of our church that we want you to be aware of. As you can tell, it is the Christmas season.
Thanks for the reassurance, Rick.
We are going to be doing lots of fun Christmas things, and one of the things that we are doing is we are collecting toys right now to benefit our Lemon Grove community. And so you have today and then next weekend to turn them in. And so if you feel like you want to participate in our toy drive that we're going to be giving back to our community, if you would bring an unwrapped, unopened, brand new toy. You can see out in the gym, if you happen to be out there, there's a table full of toys already, so we're doing a great job so far. Thank you to our men's breakfast yesterday for kicking off the collection. But we want you to be a part of it also, and so if you have toys, we would use them. One of the things that I do know, there is a request from the organization that we use to hand toys out for toys for older kids. A lot of times in these kinds of drives, teenagers get left out because a lot of people think, oh, how cute is this little stuffed bear? How cute is this and that? And so if you feel like there's something that you see that you think an older child might like, we would encourage you to purchase that and bring that as well. That's a great thing to donate to the toy drive. And like I said, so we're going to be doing it the rest of today. Also next weekend, you have a chance to donate those things. Also going on, we have our annual Christmas Eve service coming up. And part of our Christmas Eve service is that
Excuse me.
On the 24th at 6 p.m. It's a candlelight service. We encourage you to invite your friends, your family, your neighbors, your coworkers, your random strangers off the street, anybody that you want to invite to come to Christmas Eve. And we're also going to be doing Christmas Day service the next day at 10:30 a.m. Our normal time, we know it's a Sunday. We plan for it to be a quick service so that you can get back home, spend time with your family. But those are the two dates coming up soon that we want you to participate in, be aware of, know what's going on. And also, in conjunction with our candlelight service, we are doing a cookie reception like following. And so if you are a baker and you think, man, I have like the best Christmas cookie, we would encourage you to contact Nancy. She's our publicist. You can email her publicist@ccog.org, or if you'll see in our weekly email update, she has a link straight to her email in there. And so she's also right over there at that table, kind of waving. And so Nancy is a great person. She would love to know what cookies you plan to bring so that we can share that with people as we end our Christmas Eve service. So those are some of the things going on. There's lots of other great things happening in our church, and the best way to know about it is to be connected to our weekly email updates. So if you are not signed up for that, get signed up for that so that you can know all the things going on. So I'm gonna pray as we continue worship. If you're able to, if you would please stand with me, and we're gonna just keep worshiping God this Sunday morning. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the time that we have to come together, to be a part of your community, to be a part of your body, to be a part of the changes and the things that you're doing here on earth. Thank you for this little pocket of people that come together to believe in you, God, in Lemon Grove. Thank you for the ability we have to affect change in this community and through the different things that we plan to do. God, we just ask that you would make sure that everything that we do here would bring glory to your name. And so we pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. What? Oh, oops. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart join in and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. We will sing, 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 joy to the world,
Joy to the world.
we will sing,
We'll
sing, sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat the sounding joy. We will sing, sing, sing. Joy to the world. We will sing, sing, sing. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. We will sing, sing, sing. Joy to the world. We will sing, sing, sing. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before the opening to the sun above. Joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before the opening to the sun above. We will sing, sing, sing. Joy to the world. We will sing, sing, sing. Joy to the world. Highest thrones you left for a manger, born as the hope of man, the perfect solution for our redemption, fulfilling the Father's plan. Holy, oh my God, you're holy. You're the one and only, worthy of all praise. Glory, I give all the glory to the one and only, name above all names. shepherds and angels together in worship welcome you with a song. And still on the earth we join with the heavens, adoring you, Christ the Lord. Holy, oh my God, you're holy. You're the one and only, worthy of all praise. Glory, I give all the glory to the one and only, name above all names. Jesus Christ, the chosen one, there's no one like you, Lord. Jesus Christ, the saving Lamb, our praise is yours alone. Jesus Christ, the chosen one, there's no one like you, Lord. Jesus Christ, the saving Lamb, our praise is yours alone. Holy, oh my God, you're holy. You're the one and only, worthy of all praise. Glory, I give all the glory to the one and only, name above all names. Glory be to God. Come, oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile. Until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Come thou day spring from on high, and cheer us by drawing nigh. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
You may be seated.
Alright, now that's it for the worship time. Here is where we diverge, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call my friend Rick, and we will begin Branch Brothers. I will see you all in a few minutes.
gonna give in. This is our crime, this is our sin. But I still believe, I still believe. Through the pain, through the grief, through the lies, through the stones, through the cries, and through the walls. No, I still believe. These waves to cover me. I've turned and tossed upon the waves. When the darkness comes, I feel the grave. But I still believe, I still believe. Through the cold and through the heat, through the rain and through the tears, through the crowds, through the cheers. No, I still believe.
Alright everyone, I return, and I am on the call with my good friend Rick, so I will be putting the, setting up the audio and window capture real quick. And we'll get, yeah, here here we go. There's the audio capture for Discord. And where's the video capture? Oh, here we go. Oh, that's kind of small.
Hey, I should probably warn you, there's a bit of a delay between the stream and our Discord call.
Yeah, I noticed that. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. But I think that because there's no delay between between you saying something on Discord and my computer and it showing up on my end, we should be good.
All right, so I can just keep on chatting. We run it.
Yep, here we are.
Wow, this is crazy. There I am.
Yeah. So I still believe. Rick, do you still believe?
Of course I believe, man.
Alright, so I've been, I started rereading my Bible this week, and I've gotten through Genesis, and I think I'm at the part of Exodus where, oh boy, what was it? Yeah, I was like halfway through the bit where Moses has taken the Israelites out of Egypt. I was on like the midway point of the 10 plagues, I think, or was it 7?
No, it was 10. Like, the 10 plagues are 10.
Ah, that's right. I had to second guess myself, because I know how much the Lord loves the number 7.
Yeah, that is true. Funny you mentioned that. I'm actually on, like, the opposite end of the Bible. Right now I'm actually reading through Acts of the Apostles, so right now we're at that phase where the early church has gotten started, and they're just going around the world, spreading the word to various peoples, both Jews and Gentiles, and, you know, schemes and scams happen along the way, but regardless, they persevere, and they keep on trucking along.
And that's good. They set the example for the rest of us, really.
Pretty much. Although, I have also been reading this book called Walking with God, and basically, it just, it's based on this narrative plan created by Jeff Cavins, who's one of the biggest, like, Catholic biblical scholars out there, and basically what he did was he basically, recontextualized the Bible into a narrative that people can follow. So, it composed of basically 12 time periods of a total of 14 books, going from Genesis to, Acts, and in this book is basically just him going through these time periods and not only retelling the stories in these books, but explaining further context behind these events. And of course, the first chapter is on the early world, which is the first couple chapters of Genesis. Then there was the patriarchs, which deals with the patriarchs of the faith being Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then right now, the last one I read was actually on Desert Wandering, so that's where you are right now. So I just read that yesterday.
Oh, so, nice.
So basically, even I wasn't reading the books you were reading, I was reading the recap of the books you were reading. If that makes any sense.
Perfect. Then we'll more or less be on the same page.
Pretty much.
I always find it interesting how Jacob's story goes, because Jacob is quite clearly a fucking asshole.
Yeah, it's like, literally the day they were born, when they grabbed Esau, Jacob was clinging to his foot.
Right. And then he made Esau sell him his birthright, and then he stole his blessing from his father as well.
I mean, to be fair, in the case of Esau, he didn't really want the birthright in the first place. He didn't care about that. Now, the blessing, on the other hand, that's what ticked him off.
Right. But it does come up when he's stolen his blessing, so he's clearly kind of upset about it.
And the interesting thing about this whole situation is that God foretold that the elder would serve the younger, that Esau was always meant to serve Jacob, but the issue here is that Jacob gained it through deceit. And actually, talk about this in Walking with God. And because of this deceit, he actually gained deceit himself. So first, when he goes off to live with his relative, of course he finds Rachel, falls in love with her. He works for his uncle for about 7 years, and he goes to, of course, take his bride, only to find out it was not Rachel, but her older sister, Leah.
Right, and he gets tricked by the guy he'd been working for 7 years, and then he has to work for him for another 7 to get the girl he actually wanted.
Yeah, and then during this time period, they both give him, like, their handmaids, so, of course, he ends up with,
like, 4
we now know are, like, the 12 kids, yeah. I think at the time it was actually either 10 or 11. I don't think Benjamin was born yet by this point. But And then basically after that, right before he sees his brother, he wrestles basically with an angel, and basically, um, essentially apologizes for his wrongdoing, and because of that, what was it?
Oh, was
The
it an
God
angel or
basically-
God? I had been under the impression that he was wrestling with actual God.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because after this encounter, God basically changed Jacob's name to Israel, and the name Israel in Hebrew means one
One
who
who's-
wrestles with God.
Right.
And you consider what happens to the kingdom of Israel later.
That makes
basically
perfect
describes the
sense.
relationship for most of the Bible. That was their relationship in a nutshell. I saw this in the Desert Wanderings, and then later on we would see it when they become a kingdom, and then a divided kingdom. We saw that time and time again. So it's actually quite fitting. But after this encounter, of course, Jacob sees his brother again, but this time it's on much more peaceful terms. His brother basically forgave him for all that stuff, and they made amends. It's actually one of the few instances in the Old Testament where people who had a conflict actually made amends and made peace.
Right. The only other instance I can think of immediately is Joseph and his brothers.
Yes, that actually happened near the end of the picture. Yes.
Yeah, shortly thereafter. I can't remember if Joseph's story is told before or after Jacob's.
Joseph is after, because Joseph is actually the eldest son of Rachel, who is Jacob's favorite wife. So
Oh, that's right.
that whole saga happened after Jacob returned.
Yeah, I always found it. There's two things I found funny in the Bible in this kind of segment that we're talking about. One is how what was it? Was it Rachel who stole the dude's household gods when Jacob was on his way out?
I don't remember.
Yeah, somebody stole them, and the dude couldn't find them, and I'm like, what does... And all this time I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, what does this accomplish? Why would you do that?
It was, yeah, I can't remember. It's been a while since I read those books. I don't entirely remember that part.
Yeah.
What I do know is that after that, eventually the uncle decides to let them go, and then they go their way.
Right, right.
What I do remember, however, is after the brothers come back with Benjamin, I think, yeah, Joseph put like something in Benjamin's bag to like have an excuse to go after them, and that's actually... So once Judah basically offers his place in place of Benjamin, that's when Joseph realized, wow, these guys really changed. You know what? About time I tell them the truth. And he goes ahead and says, hey, I'm the brother that you sold away, and I want you back. So.
And then that's how the Israelites came to be living in Egypt.
And oddly enough, they end up not only in Egypt, they end up in like the best land in Egypt.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, the land of Goshen. And oddly enough, I don't know if this might be a spoiler for you, but during the second half of the plagues, the land of Goshen was basically exempt from those second half of the plagues 4 through 9, I believe.
Oh, that's
the land of Goshen was not impacted at all. Like, it only impacted the places where the Israelites were not living.
That's right. I remember that. I always assumed it was. I always assumed that it wasn't affected because, you know, painting the blood of the lamb on the door frame and all that.
Yeah, that's actually quite significant because in ancient Egypt, one of the gods they worshiped was like a lamb-based god. So by not only eating the lamb, sacrificing it, putting that blood on the door, that was not only did that protect them from the angel of death, that was a sign to the Egyptians that we don't care about your pagan gods, we don't care about your tradition, and want nothing to do with you. And from that point going forward, the Egyptians and Israelites would not be able to live with each other ever again. So following the 10th plague, they basically left and went their separate way. I mean, yeah, Pharaoh did try to come back one last time to bring them back, but they all died in the flood, so it didn't work out well for them.
Yeah, when the sea collapsed behind them as they were leaving Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sad to think about, too, because Moses had to grow up alongside Pharaoh, and you can see parts where Pharaoh has this realization, and then he ends up going back on his relinquishing of the Israelites.
Yeah, that was definitely his biggest problem, was really the hardening of his heart. And I remember this talk in regards to David. I go, Why was his heart hard when God spoke to him? And the issue, it was not that God was hardening his hearts just to...
Right, that's a very common misconception.
Yeah, it was more so that Pharaoh couldn't accept that God was real. He couldn't accept what was true. So instead of just acknowledging that and letting him go, he just basically doubled down on his stances and just went harsher. That's what... And another way to describe it is almost like sunlight hitting soil versus concrete. When the sun bathes soil, whatever inside of it gets bigger and grows, whether it's like a flower, grass, or even trees, it grows, it sprouts, it becomes lively.
Even if you leave a patch of earth alone, weeds will just start growing on it.
Oh, pretty much, yeah. But the soil is like the heart of a believer. When God enters their presence, they are delighted by it, they're excited by it, and they grow nice and strong. However, when the sun hits concrete, when mud, it turns hard, it gets cracked, it gets rough. This is like the heart of the unbeliever, because when God reaches out to them, they don't adapt it, so they just close themselves off, in a sense.
It's interesting that you say that, because I have actually known a few atheists who became believers that I have a great amount of respect for, because they became an example among the believers. Prince may have become a Jehovah's Witness, but he gave up on some of his more promiscuous behavior, and I respect the absolute hell out of him for it. C.S. Lewis was once an atheist before becoming a Christian, and he went on to become one of the greatest Christian theologians and teachers in existence.
Oh, definitely. He wrote, all his books on Christianity are definitely hands down some of the best. Fortunately, I haven't got around to reading them, but I would really like to at some point.
I assume you've at least read Chronicles of Narnia.
I've watched the movie. Does that count?
Really? So you haven't read the books?
I don't know. I just never got around to it.
Interesting. Oh, I just got a text from my mom. Hold up a second.
Don't worry, folks. We'll be right back.
Did you lock the kitchen door for... What the hell is this saying? Yeah, there we go. But yeah, no, I've actually read not just the Chronicles of Narnia, but I've read I've also read the Screwtape Letters, and I've read Mere Christianity. My next up on the reading list is The Problem of Pain, and then The Great Divorce.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I think once I'm done with like Walking with God, I'll probably look into that stuff as well. It depends on my schedule. I got to see how that works out.
I find that audiobooks are actually very helpful if you can't seem to find the time to read. I actually really like audiobooks because they give me... I can devote more of my brain power to thinking about and processing what the contents of the book are, as opposed to focusing a part of my brain to reading it. And I'd say if you're going to read C.S. Lewis's theological works, start with Mere Christianity, and then follow it up with Problem of Pain. Because Mere Christianity is kind of an introduction to this is Christianity is what this is a summary of what Christianity is about. This is why we believe what we believe. And Problem of Pain answers one of the most common questions that not just outsiders have for Christians, but what Christians have for more experienced Christians, and that is, why do bad things happen? Why does God allow suffering?
Interesting you bring that up, because in this recent episode about your podcast I was listening to, Von Arx was talking about how, as Christians, yeah, we can have blessings, but we also should expect pain and suffering, especially if you're choosing to walk with Christ, because being a Christian can be one of the toughest things you can do, not only because you're asked to give so much, but there's so many people out there who just hate and persecute you because you're going so against what everyone else is doing. Like, we're literally the kind of folks who go against the grain.
Yeah.
And that's upset people back then, and it upsets people today. Maybe not obviously for the same reasons, obviously, but in many ways, and like in some ways it's different, but in many other ways it's also the same. Like it's interesting how some things tend to stick around as time goes on.
Yeah, there's an old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Mm.
And I was actually watching a YouTube channel a couple days ago called Upon Friar Review, where they basically they're a pair of Catholic priests talking about, like, you know, bad Christian movies or decent Christian movies, or you know, stuff like that. They were kind of poking fun at pop culture and its portrayal of Christians. And there's something they said that really stuck out to me, and that's that Christianity is, by its nature, countercultural. Now, I think that maybe that should be expounded upon. Because there was a time in the United States where Christianity was very much an establishment. It's not so much anymore, and I think it's actually better because of that. But there was a time when not too long ago, when people in this country were Christians because it was simply expected of them, and it was a part of the culture. And not a lot of people really bothered to go deeper in their understanding of it.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I was actually reading a book called A Patriot's History of the United States. Now, this is obviously not a Christian book. This is sort of a history book / response to people's history. You probably heard of that one. But basically in that book, they talk a lot about how there were like seasons where people were very passionate and worthy of the faith, and seasons where people just didn't care as much and deprioritized it. And not just the case during colonial times before the U.S. was formally established, but it's a pattern that pretty much continues to this day. You know, there's always a season where, like we are right now, where Christianity is super countercultural, but then we had seasons in the past where it was the culture, and it's not like it's either one or the other. It's like a wave. It keeps going up and down really throughout the centuries.
Right, and I'm kind of reminded of the Book of Judges, in a way. I've often said that Judges is almost a microcosm or a macrocosm, depending on how you look at it, of the Christian's life. Because there will be seasons where we are absolutely on fire for God, blazing with faith. But then something will happen, and we'll simply get complacent or just slowly fade away from the faith, and then it will be renewed. And I can't help but see that that's more or less, when I read Judges, that was more or less what kept coming to mind. Lord knows that's certainly been true in my life.
I mean, it also speaks a lot to God's mercy for his people, because, you know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Like, he knows that there are people who want to serve him, but he also knows that sometimes people lose their way. Sometimes even the most devout Christians can lose their way from time to time. And I think the fact that God continued to help the people of Israel as soon as they repented, it shows he does care for them. He wants a relationship with them. But, you know, like with any relationship, it's a two-way street.
Right.
You got to give your own, too. If you're not giving your own, or you go your own way, you know, as we've seen time and time again, it leads to disaster.
Right. Let's see, what else can we talk about?
Well, I guess this is sort of our casual conversation phase, eh?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes. Let me think. Alright, what was the strangest news story you heard this week?
Kanye. Definitely Kanye.
Oh, yeah, everyone's been talking about that.
Only in the year of our Lord 2022 would we have a guy like Kanye showing up on InfoWars saying that he loved Hitler, and have Alex Jones trying to talk him out of it.
Man.
Have you actually seen the interview between those two?
I've seen clips from the interview when I was watching Brett's video on the topic, but based on what I saw, I'm like, oh man, this is a disaster.
Yeah, no, I can't help but crack up laughing because I think about Kanye wearing that ridiculous outfit and talking to the net, calling it Netanyahu. And it's like, jeez, I feel so bad for the guy because something's clearly not right upstairs. And having been there myself, your actions aren't really your own when your brain is decided it's going to go off the fucking rails.
Yeah, I will say this. He's definitely in need of help. And, I have prayed for him and just asked God to help heal his heart because, especially with the people he's surrounding himself with, he is not in a good spot.
No. Not at all.
Also, I don't know if you're aware of this, but did you know that, Milo Yiannopoulos declared himself straight, 2 years ago?
I shouldn't be surprised, and yet I am.
Yeah, I heard rumors about it. I wasn't sure, but I was talking with some friends on one of the servers I'm in, and he shared an article saying how he devoted his husband to a housemate, and how he was spiritually straight. I go, what? That I read the headline. I read the article. I just read the headline. I go, okay.
The thing about Milo, regardless of what his orientation is that the core of him is ultimately an attention whore. So you can never really be sure that he says what he means, or he means what he says, regardless of what he's saying. The man could do what Kanye did, and I still wouldn't be sure if he was fucking with us or not.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell when you're dealing with people who you can't tell. It's not like they're being dishonest. It's more so you can't tell if they're honest.
Right. It's because they just love getting a rise out of people. My brother is very much like that, and that's the little bit of hope I cling to, that my brother isn't actually a Nazi or a white supremacist. But I've seen pictures of him with his memorabilia, and I gotta say, if this is a joke, there's very few people as dedicated to a joke as he is.
Yeah. Speaking of jokes, there's this lady on TikTok, and I bleep you not. I think
we can swear here. I'm not of the mind that swearing is a sin. I mean, you heard me earlier saying hell.
Okay, so yeah, basically there's this woman on TikTok called Calcium Cannons, and basically the whole TikTok channel is revolved around her breastfeeding her kids in public.
Okay.
Yeah, at first I thought it was just some weird one-off thing just for attention. No, this is her entire channel. She's basically using her kids to gain attention online.
Oh, that is reprehensible.
Yeah, I'm it's kind of funny though, in a sense, but not funny in the sense of the kid thing. Obviously, it's not okay, but recently what I've been noticing is in the past when I would see stuff like that, I would just get mad and rant about for hours. But nowadays, I don't really get mad anymore. Instead, I basically just go into prayer and I ask God to heal their souls because, in the words of Stephen, Lord, forgive them for they know not what they're doing. And the interesting part about this is, our enemies are not against flesh and bone, but it's against the powers, the principalities, the dark forces that rule over this world. And it's those same forces that kind of drive people to commit these kind of acts or commit these kinds of sins. And that's why we're often called to pray for our enemies, because more often than not, the people who are against us, who oppose us, are really just victims of either their own circumstances or they are enslaved to their own sin. And especially when you're dealing with the deadly sins, you get addicted to that. That can lead you very far astray.
And don't I know it. I'm glad that you bring that up, though, because that's a fact that I so often forget. I unfortunately tend to get very easily distracted by this world. I have a saying that's kind of paraphrased from the Bible. It rains on the righteous and the unrighteous alike, so it's best to bring an umbrella.
Wise words. And, you're not alone on this. There are several Christians I know on several Discords I'm in who have the same problem. They'll see a news story and they'll immediately get upset. They'll get frustrated with the whole thing, which is natural. It's a human thing. Anger itself is not a sin, but
right. How we handle our anger is ultimately what determines if it becomes a sin or not.
Yeah, that's true of like emotions in general, because emotions are natural. It's what makes us human. But if you either allow your emotions to cloud your judgment, lead you astray, or you're using it as an excuse to just do what you want, regardless, especially if it's like wrong, that's when it becomes a problem.
Right, right. That was actually one of the that was one of the what's it called? Not sermon, workshop? Yeah, we'll go with that. It was one of the workshops that we had at the men's camp that I attended earlier this year, was dealing with anger. I remember it because the name stuck out to me. Krankenstein or Mouse. And it was talking about the two extremes of how men tend to handle anger. Either just unleashing it with no control, or just channeling it inward and bottling it up.
I've been on both ends of that spectrum now that you mentioned it. Now I'm kind of in the middle where, yeah, I might get upset, but I just try to just let it out little by little. Like, I don't like blow up the way I used to whenever I get I just tend to release it little by little, just so it's that way I don't get to that breaking point, essentially.
Right. No, and thankfully, as long as I stay on my medication, I tend to be very good at taking care of my anger in a healthy and constructive manner. Off of my meds, it's a very different story. That the internal becomes external, and the external becomes internal. It's not a pretty picture. But what was I about to say? I was going somewhere with this. Oh yes, I remember now. When I was at the men's camp, I attended a workshop with another person, and he was talking about, or he was asking questions about, like, how is the right way to preach to people. And I wasn't the speaker, but I was sitting next to him, and I turned to him and I'm like, you know, I have thought about this myself, and I often go with the approach that we are to be brothers first and preachers second. And apparently that actually got, like, everyone talking. People who were not in the workshop at the time ended up hearing about that, and word got back to my pastor, who, when we were eating dinner together at the camp, he had mentioned how he was very proud of me and how well I was representing our church.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Of course, we're called to be in fellowship. We are, we're not, it's not just. It's like I don't think I told my dad this once a while ago, because he said something on the line. So, oh, you don't have to be in church to worship the Lord. And I go, Dad, you can't worship God in a vacuum. The reason why the church is here is so we can have a community of people to worship God and serve one another. That's part of the reasons why we are called to be in communion, to be together. Because if it's just one guy preaching the mountaintop, people won't believe him. But you got a group of people who worship together. That's can help to bring more people into the fold who otherwise either may not know or may not be interested.
Right. I do see where your dad's coming from, though, because there are those who tend to who focus on the physical aspect of it and think that church is just the building. I have, one of the first churches I attended was a megachurch, and this is probably where my disdain for megachurches comes from. I was too young to really pick up on it at the time. I've only gotten these recollective stories from Mom, and every time, and it fills me with disgust. They were going to pray a blessing for the children of new parents, and when Mom brought my sister to them, they refused to pray for her.
Really?
Yeah. Now, the thing about my sister is she is severely cognitively impaired. And I can't ascribe motive because I'm obviously not the people who refused. Best case scenario, I think they knew that my mom wanted them to pray for healing for my sister, and that wouldn't happen.
You mean like it wouldn't happen right away? Or that...
As someone who's seen what happens when you try to pray a disease away without taking practical application towards it, let me put it to you this way, Rick. I don't buy into faith healing. I think it's theoretically possible because when God's in the equation, you can't write anything off. But I don't think that happens outside of very extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, I would argue, because, yeah, I get where you're coming from. There have been a lot of people out there who claim to be, like, faith healers and stuff, but unfortunately a lot of those tend to be on the grifty side. But there have also been instances in the Word, particularly the New Testament, not only from Christ himself, but also from the apostles and various disciples, where they've actually healed people, like they've caused the crippled to walk, they've given sight to the blind, they've done many great things in the Word. But I think it also requires a great deal of genuine faith and genuine care, and it can be one of the hardest things to do. And actually, now that you mention that, this reminds me of a passage in the New Testament where the disciples were doing precisely described. They were trying to heal someone. They were trying to cast out a demon, because someone had a demon. They were trying to cast it out. None of the disciples can do it. And then Jesus something along the lines of, "Oh, ye of little faith, how long must I be with you?" And then after that, he goes and he expels the demon, and then the guy gets free. Then the disciples go up and they go, "Lord, what happened? How come we couldn't cast out the demon?" And if I recall correctly, it's something on the lines of, what was it?
I know the story you're talking about, and Jesus says something to the effect of, oh God, what was it? Fuck.
I think he gave a parable, right? He gave a parable, and he used that to...
Yeah, or... I want to say that he had said that they were halfway there, that they were trying to combat the demon with purely faith, whereas this is a demon that must be cast out with faith and fasting, or something to that effect. Unfortunately, I read the Gospel, like, about 2 years ago. It takes a long time to read the Bible from front to back, even with audiobook.
Man, I did the Bible in a year. I read through the Bible cover to cover, like, 2 years in a row. I'm in the middle of the third one. I actually just finished rereading the Gospel of Luke again a few weeks ago, and I honestly feel kind of embarrassed because I just read through and I'm like, well, I can't remember this. I remember the story, but I don't remember what happened after, like that specific moment.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Rick, my memory's a damn sieve too.
Like, it's one of those instances where you can't know the general story, you know the general flow of what happens, but you can't narrow down the specifics.
Yeah. A lot of the Bible is like that for me, where I can recognize the story and remember certain details, but if I tried to retell it, I'd fumble a lot.
Yeah, it takes... I will say this, it does take many years to get to the point where you can just, like, quote scripture verse by verse and just know it by heart. That takes many years of practice, and it's part of the reason why I've decided to keep reading the Bible on a yearly basis going forward. So I can get better at not only knowing the word, but understanding it better.
That's partly why I decided to reread it again. Hopefully I'll get there one day where I can remember all the dang thing.
Yeah, it's definitely... It's like a muscle. It's something you need to train for.
Absolutely. There was another part of the scripture that stuck out to me as we were talking about my sister, though. And, yeah, I think it actually very much applies to all three of us, me, my brother, and sister, because we were all born with disabilities. There is a part in the Gospel where Jesus and the apostles are walking through town, and they see a man who is disabled, and the apostles kind of ask him something to the effect of, "So, Lord, if this man hasn't sinned, what sin had his parents committed?" And Jesus tells them, "None. This man was born disabled so that he may demonstrate the glory of God."
Interesting. You know what? Now that you say that, that in turn reminds me of something from the book of Leviticus, where it says, "The father shall not be judged for the sins of the son, nor the sons judged for the sins of their father. But each man is judged in accordance with his own sins."
So wait, then where does the whole concept of sins of the father come from?
I'm not entirely sure. I think that could more so describe the effect of how one sins you commit in life can have a negative impact on those around you. For example...
Oh, that would make sense.
Because the example, after David took over, I think it was David, right? He had found out that Saul had basically oppressed the Gibeonites. Now, for those who don't know, the Gibeonites were actually not part of the covenant. They were an outside people who basically made a covenant with the people of Israel because during the events of Joshua, they had saw how the Israelites were wiping out kingdoms left and right. They didn't want to be wiped out. So basically, they pretended to be a people from some faraway land and saying, hey, we want to be in covenant with you because of your greatness. And then later on, they will find out the Gibeonites were actually native to the land of Canaan. They were one of the nations that lived in Canaan. But because they didn't consult God with this, there was a bit of a problem. But basically, they end up getting kind of roped in anyways. So they're almost like honorary Jews, if that makes sense.
Right.
But during Saul's reign, at some point, while he was persecuting David, he had oppressed the Gibeonites, and they basically want retribution. So
right, and so they go to David, getting ready to mess his shit up.
No, pretty much. But basically, I think David consoled with the Lord, and basically, what he told him to do was to hand over some of Saul's sons to the Gibeonites, and ultimately, that's what David did. He took 7 of Saul's sons who were still living, that didn't die in that battle, and they were given to the Gibeonites, and then once they got them, they were all basically hanged in trees.
Interesting. You know, that reminds me of some scripture that I was thinking on earlier this week. There's a passage in the Bible that always stuck out to me. A man who hangs from a tree is cursed. And you know, people often refer to that in reference to Jesus being on the cross, but Jesus wasn't hung on a tree. He was hung on a cross. He was crucified. But there was a man who it would make sense for the curse of the Lord to be upon who was hung from a tree, and that was Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, because he hung himself because he felt so guilty about what happened with Jesus, he just hung himself on a tree.
Yeah, Judas is an interesting character, because he had to betray Jesus so that Scripture could be fulfilled, and so that he could die for the sins of mankind. So, without Judas betraying Jesus, everything kind of goes off the rails. So you gotta wonder if those actions were really his own, or if something greater was at play inside of him.
Maybe. What we do know is that prior to the betrayal, Jesus seemed like another loyal disciple of Christ who would have been willing to die for him. There is a lot of speculation as to what could have happened. Because back when I was reading the Gospels with About Your Podcast, Father Mike Smith, he said something along the lines of, you know, one of the most common theories is that Judas basically had a second life. Like, sure, he may have been his disciple who was with Jesus, but it's very likely he may have lived a separate life where he did certain things, and in that second life, that's when, at some point, came to the conclusion that, hey, if I can get this money, I can betray the Christ, maybe to gain some favor or something.
Oh, that's right, that's right. And I do believe that there's a passage in the Gospel that mentions that Judas also was an embezzler.
Was this before or after he started walking with Jesus?
I don't know. When I get to the Gospel, I'll have to pay extra attention to that part.
Yeah, pretty much. My assumption is it probably happened before, because some of the disciples were outright sinners before they started following Christ.
I mean, just look at Paul.
Oh, Paul. You know, it's funny. I'm actually was reading the first letter of Corinthians, one of the books I'm reading right now, and in that letter, he basically says, hey, I am the least of the disciples because I persecuted the church.
I was the Pharisee of Pharisees.
Pretty much, yeah. And the fact that he was chosen to preach the word, and he wrote most of the letters of the New Testament, because that was his calling, that was his role, and I would say he did it very well.
Yeah. One of my favorite letters from Paul is about the altar to the unknown God. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I actually just read that earlier today. That was when he was in Athens, right?
Yeah. He's I just love that entire thing. He goes before them and says, I see you are a very religious people. You even have a shrine here to the unknown God. I say to you that this God has a name, and he is the only one true God. And now you know his name, so you should serve him faithfully.
Yeah, and the thing about that was, the thing that got them upset at him was not so much that, it was the fact that he basically said that the human is both the body and the spirit. Because the Greeks believed, for the longest time, that we were just spirits, that the body simply cage and traps the soul, and that once you die, then you're truly free. But Paul teaches, no, you are body and foot and soul, and when you're resurrected, you gain a new body. and they didn't like the concept of like the body being a part of you. They were very against that. That's what made them upset with him.
Right. It's interesting that we bring that up because the Upon Friar Review was actually talking about forms of heresy in one of the things they were reviewing, and they actually mentioned that exact belief as a specific type of heresy. I can't remember the name for it. You would probably know it because being Catholic and all that. But yeah,
I believe the term was Hinduism, because it actually revolves from the Council of Nicaea. And one of the main goals of that council, it was not to debate biblical scripture. A lot of people said that, but that's simply not true.
No, it was to deal with the people who collaborated with the persecution of the church.
Yeah, there was that, and there was also they were trying to combat this ideology that
Arian.
That Jesus, the Arian one. It was the idea that like Jesus was being like separate from God, that he was just the Son, but not God. We're not fully God. And the church said, no, we believe that Jesus Christ, both fully God and fully human. He is a part of the Trinity. He is the Son and he is God.
The Logos in the flesh.
Yes, precisely.
The Council of Nicaea is fascinating to me. I think it's really cool to read up on. One of kind of related. That's one of my favorite Doctor Who historical stories. Actually, centers around how the Fifth Doctor travels to see the Council of Nicaea with a few of his companions. I actually told my mom about that, and she got all excited. And then when she found out it was an audiobook, she was like, "Oh, never mind." Then she thought it was an actual episode that she could watch.
I thought it was an episode too. I know it did an audiobook. Was that like... It was an actual book first, but like...
I don't know if any of the Big Finish stories have been adapted into the books. I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to do.
Oh, did they start as audiobooks?
Yeah, the Big Finish to this day, are mostly audio stories. Big Finish is kind of an offshoot. Think of it as Doctor Who's answer to the Star Wars Expanded Universe.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I learned a lot about Christianity and by studying the history of Rome.
That's not a bad place to start, considering how instrumental Rome was during the New Testament.
It's really funny to think about, because Rome did not like the Christians at first. At best, they were considered meh and kind of an afterthought. But most of the time it was persecution all day, every day, 24/7. And because you got Nero being a fucking asshole. Admittedly, as far as emperors go, he's not the worst. But you don't want to be a Christian in Nero's Rome. Bad times were had by all. But Diocletian was actually worse. And I don't get why Diocletian isn't more vilified by Christians than Nero, because he was so much worse. Although, admittedly, I never really know what to make of Diocletian, because in spite of the persecution and all that, he did have one of the best quotes of any Roman emperor, and probably a humbler perspective than many other emperors at the time. And this quote kind of reflects that. "If only you saw the majestic cabbages I was growing back on my farm, you too would give up the pursuit of worldly power."
You know, it's interesting you mentioned all that, because I was, of course, reading about the persecution in Acts, and one of the things Father Alex talked about was how, in spite of the persecution, actually is what helped to spread Christianity. You know, because they couldn't just settle down, because they were constantly they ended up traveling pretty much all over the world at the time, and as a result, they ended up spreading Christianity to more and more people who wouldn't have otherwise heard it. And that's why you see people like Paul going to all these different cities, not just Jewish cities, Gentile cities in Asia, throughout Europe. I think he went to Spain one time, and you know, they just went all over the place, and wherever they went, they just spread the gospel. And more, in spite of the Romans' persecutions, more and more people just heard the word of God.
Right, and part of
the
interesting thing about Diocletian's persecution specifically is that around that time, because the Christians had gotten so used to and even embracing their death in the name of service to God, the Romans actually came to respect the absolute hell out of the Christians for it. I remember a quote, more or less. I'm truncating this, obviously, because I'm going by memory here. But it's like, if these people really do believe this, and they are so willing to go their deaths without fear, maybe they're actually telling the truth. Maybe they're actually onto something.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why Jesus taught his disciples, when enemy strikes you, turn the other cheek, because I think by showing strength in the face of death, in the face of fear, it does soften the hearts of the persecutors, because it makes them realize, if these people aren't even going to fight back, are they truly as bad as we made them out to be? Are they really the bad guys, or are we the baddies?
Yeah.
Are we the bad guys?
Are we the baddies? There is certainly something to be said about going to your death peacefully, and how pacifism can gain the respect of others. I myself am not a pacifist anymore. I used to be. Witnessing the eve what happened in the eve of Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve 2016, broke that out of me. For a while, I was a vicious, malevolent bastard who hungered for the blood of Islamics because of that incident. I relinquished my hatred, though, and now I understand that retribution must be tempered by mercy, if it is to be any good.
And remember, vengeance is of the Lord.
Right.
We don't seek the vengeance ourselves. That's why we pray for those who hate you, pray for those who persecute you.
Right.
Because the Lord has things covered.
And there was an incident where this happened in 2018, I want to say, or 2019, thereabouts. I was on the way home from a friend's house. I was taking the I still take public transportation, but I was on the trolley back to El Cajon, and these two black kids, I call them kids, they're in their late teens probably, get on the bus, and I'm playing my Game Boy. I had been a security guard at the time, and old habits die hard. I look up from my Game Boy because I see new people getting on, and one of these two chuckle fucks, I will be polite and restrain myself and not use the gamer word, even though it perfectly describes their actions and mindset, point a gun in my face. Now, up to that point, I had actually thought to myself, you know what, maybe I don't need a gun. I have several mental illnesses. I may be better off not having one. Now, I had carried a pocket knife on me for protection, but I ain't Leon S. Kennedy, and I'm pretty sure I'm not Brock Sampson either. So I ain't winning a gunfight with a knife. That's just not in the cards.
You can't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah. And so I just look at this guy in shock, and I think to myself, okay, God, if this is it, and I've had a good run, thanks for everything. I'll see you in about, T-minus 1 minute. And as I think that, the guy just laughs and puts his gun away.
Now, so he was just trying to scare you.
Pretty sure, yeah. Which is why that incident left something in me that I'm not exactly proud of. I don't think bad of all black people, but I think that if you're gonna act like trash, you should be treated like trash. And maybe sometimes a slur can be appropriate. If you want to act like human garbage and get a rise out of people by threatening to kill them, you deserve absolute disdain from everyone around you.
Now that you mentioned that, I think of this phrase a lot. Armed society is a polite society. Based on the story, you don't live in an area with a lot of armed people, do you?
Well, it's Alpine. It's kind of one of the more rural areas, so I might. I don't know.
Oh, because I was about to say,
at the time, I certainly didn't. El Cajon is not many armed people except for the criminals.
And that's the thing, though, because I will say this: if that guy lived in a neighborhood where everyone was armed, or he knew everyone was armed,
oh yeah, he wouldn't be pulling that for fun. No way.
No. And that's what I'm saying, right? That's actually part of the reason why I wanted to move to a more, I would say, redder area, because those places tend to have not only more armed people in the populace, but they tend to have a lot less crime. I'm noticing time and time again, especially in the last couple of years, the places with the highest amount of crime are typically areas with like gun-free zones or places where people in general just aren't armed for whatever reason.
Right.
And it just makes me not want to live in those areas. You know, I'd rather be around people who can be dangerous but choose not to be than live in a place where only the harmful ones have the means to cause harm.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you 100%. And, you know, part of the reason that I went off my medication was because I wanted to become an armed security guard, because you don't get paid worth a damn if you're unarmed. You make 50 cents above minimum wage. That's it. Now, if this weren't California, that might make a difference. I don't know. I've never worked in any state other than California, so I can't tell you. But here, that don't mean dick. You get paid damn well if you're armed, though. The thing is, you can't own and operate a firearm in public if you have any medication, if you have to take medication that affects how your brain chemistry works. That law...
Let me guess, that's some California law, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think that, and because of the incident that ended in my hospitalization, I have come to the conclusion that that law ultimately does more harm than good. I think a better way to go about it would be to write that you have to be on medication for 10 years without incident, hospitalization, or any such crisis instance, and you are eligible to own and operate a firearm as any other person would be.
Yeah, personally, I'm of the opinion that any restrictions on firearms is unconstitutional. However, the proposal that you made does sound at least like a reasonable one. It does set at least some kind of a standard in terms of getting it back, because I think these, especially these like blanket bans, were like, oh, you can't own this pistol because it has like one extra bullet. I'm like, come on, guys, this is so like you don't know what people need. Like people being like, oh, why do you need a gun with 50 bullets? I'm like, do you know what that person's been through? Do you know why they're looking for it? No, you don't, because you're not that person. Like, everyone has different reasons for getting the kind of guns that they do.
Yeah.
And you trying to put these arbitrary restrictions because you don't like the big scary black things is completely ridiculous.
That sounds pretty racist.
Okay, to be clear, I'm
they have gun prejudice.
The people. Let me be entirely clear. I am talking about guns, not people.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time, man. But
no,
you know, it's interesting that you pointed out like the ammo capacity ban that we have here. I actually knew a girl. I had become friends with her, and there was a potential that we would start dating. She had actually been trafficked. Now,
What?
yeah, she escaped. She faked a seizure, and they abandoned her at a hospital. But she ended up seeing one of the people who tried to traffic her, and she fled the state. But with that knowledge, because this was around the time that it was looking like we could possibly be dating, I thought to myself, you know, if they came for her, I don't know how many dudes I'm facing. I think I need a bit more hardware than just a 10-round mag.
Yeah, they don't exactly... Yeah, clearly, when people involved, especially people involved in stuff like that, you need to come prepared.
Yeah.
Like, a little pea shooter with like 5 bullets is not going to stop a whole army. It just won't.
Right. A Smith & Wesson 500 would definitely put down whoever you're facing, but you need something to go with that, because that's the punch. You need the that's got the punch, but it's slow. You need something with better capacity and fires a bit faster if you're taking on several guys at once.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, these situations are so situated. Yeah, sure, they're not guaranteed to happen, but it's like that old saying, right? I'd rather have a gun and not need one than to need a gun and not have one.
Exactly.
It's always good to be prepared for really any type of situation that could happen, especially if you live in an area where those dangerous kind of things happen more often. You want to come prepared. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're dependent on somebody else to save you. Because even in the best areas, police response is like an average, what 2-3 minutes?
15.
Oh, wow. A lot can happen in 15 minutes, I'll say that.
Because I'll tell you something, Rick. Those areas that don't have a lot of crime, are usually rural areas. And the thing about being in a rural area is that the police station is a good ways from where you are. But when shit hits the fan, as you said, yeah, you need it's like having a fire extinguisher. It's good. Yes, you can wait on emergency services, but you're better off having a tool for that situation should the need arise.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's the thing about fires. You know, people will say, "Oh, you don't need a gun. We got the police." And I go, "Really? So if you don't need a gun because you're the police, why do you still have a fire extinguisher if you don't have a fire department?"
I've actually made that exact argument to a friend who was pro gun control, and he said that's a false comparison because you can't kill people with a fire extinguisher. I decided to be a smartass and say, "Yeah, sure you can. You can bash someone over the head with it, and if it's one of those chemical ones, you can give them chemical burns."
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And here's the thing about the human mind: we could make a weapon out of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, guns are definitely one of the most effective ways to kill somebody, but people don't just kill with guns. I mean, look what's happening in the UK. I think they fully banned firearms. Most of their stuff is like knife crimes.
Oh, yeah, and you know, even the mass tragedies, you got the kebabs that figure out that you can run people over with trucks.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, there's a million ways to kill. I was not going through all of them because we don't want to encourage that kind of violence on the show. But the point of the matter is, if somebody wants to do something bad, the method of execution doesn't matter. It's really all about the motive. If they want to harm somebody,
they will find a way of doing it.
Precisely.
I know someone who said that they had to wear shoes that couldn't be used to turn into a weapon, and just to make a point, someone took the rubber shoe off that person and tried to stuff it in their mouth and suffocate them.
Oh dear.
Now, this was on a cartoon show. It was American Dad, but you know, I thought about it and I'm like, yeah, you know what? That really is a good point. Anything's a weapon if you're inventive enough.
Yeah, some people they don't think that way. They don't think. They think that we just ban this, then people just get along and it'll be great. And I go, you do not know how the human heart works.
No, you don't. I actually had there was a thing in my high school years. I have an autistic fascination with Doctor Who, still do, and I had a sonic screwdriver in my coat pocket, and it was the 10th Doctor's one. It had this ultraviolet light on it. And I don't remember how this happened, but I actually used it to blind someone. Temporarily.
Like it actually made them blind for a few minutes.
Yeah. Because I shined an ultraviolet light right in their eyes.
Oh, that explains it. Like, never mind. Like, how did you... No, never mind.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
Yeah. But, you know, you wouldn't think that a toy sonic screwdriver that was meant to reveal an invisible ink pen could be used as a weapon. And
you weren't even intending to harm that person, right?
No, I was. I don't remember why. I think there was a fight. I don't know. Or it could have been one of the few instances where I was just being a jackass.
Yeah.
There was this one guy in high school that I just kicked in the nuts because I could.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. That sounds hilarious.
It kind of was.
I never did though, because like I'm a good Christian boy. But hey, I can't deny the thought came across my mind.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure everyone has those. There's those moments where they have like a bit of cognitive interference where they realize, I could hurt this person and get away with it. The problem is, when you have bad impulse control because you're a teenage boy, those intrusive thoughts and cognitive interference tends to be a lot harder to not act on.
Oh, especially when you're in the process of growing up. Those hormones, man, they do something to you.
Yeah. That they do. You know, we were talking about Paul earlier. I find him to be honestly the most relatable apostle in the entire group, and it mostly comes from the verse where he's like ranting at himself. I do the things I know I shouldn't, and I don't do the things I know I should, and it's driving me crazy. Truly, I must be a wicked creature. And you know, I don't know why why that only stuck in my brain after reading the Bible from front to back the first time. But you know, the more I think, like whenever I get in one of my ruts where I just reflect on how truly like some of the more reprehensible stuff I've done, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I feel like Paul. I know a lot of people like talk about Job and feel like he's and they relate to him, but no, God has God allowed the devil to more or less wreck Job's entire life, everything. Most people don't go through that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen to anyone, but you know, there's a world of difference between things not going right, or you not being able to do the right thing, or despairing because of how rough things have been, and the devil takes away your entire family and just wrecks everything for you.
Yeah, that's honestly, the only reason that even happened in the first place was because the devil tried to claim that Job only loved God because he had all this great stuff, and that if it was taken away from him, he would walk away. But God was like, no. Job is my loyal and faithful servant, and even if you did that to him, he would still be faithful to me because he loves me. And lo and behold, the devil did what he did, but Job never gave up. In fact, the big conflict in that book was actually not so much Job turning on God, but rather his friends basically accusing him of doing something wrong because of all this bad stuff.
Oh, I know.
They were under the mentality that if bad things happened to you, you had to have done something bad for this to happen. But Job's whole kid is like, hey, listen, I've been faithful to God my whole life. I've never deviated once, and yet all this stuff happened. The only thing I want to know is why it happened in the first place. And this conversation goes on for pretty much the majority of the book. In fact, it's not till the very end where God comes in and basically just, I don't even think he really answers the question directly. He basically just shows Job the whole world, and then basically after that, Job basically reconciles with God, and God also rebukes his friends for basically accusing him of wrongdoing.
Right, and if I remember correctly, Job got his family restored by God as well.
Yeah, he didn't just restore it. God doubled everything he lost. He had twice the number of sheep, twice the number of cattle, and he had twice the number of kids, and he ended up with the 3 most beautiful daughters in all the land of Ur. Like, God blessed him well beyond what he had before, put him in an even better position than what he had before. Like, what the devil took away, God doubled. It was incredible.
I actually made a meme about the Book of Job a while back. I have it right here. I'm going to post it in our Discord. Because it's really a great summary of Job's interaction with God towards the end. Job: God, why do bad things happen? God, my goals are beyond your understanding.
Very true. You know, and one of the things that stuck out to me in that whole section was how he showed those 2 big monsters. He showed all those little details that sort of go on in the world. It's like, especially, these are like the kind of things that we don't even think about. But like, God is in control of all that stuff. Like, even the tiny piece of grass that falls on the ground, God's moving that, even.
I know.
It just shows how involved he is with this, not just with us, but with this whole universe that we live in. Like, it's stuff that's truly is beyond our comprehension. Stuff we would never even wonder about. We just kind of walk about our day.
Yeah. It's really wild to think about how involved God is on the macro scale and the micro scale as well. Because, you know, a lot of the Bible presents God as this almost unknowable, absolute force that's beyond nature itself. And yet, he cares enough about us to be involved in our lives into every minuscule detail.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, it's funny. One of the most common descriptions about God is that he's this, like, raging tyrant who oppresses people. But in reality, anyone who reads the Bible and reads it attentively knows that everything God does at his core is out of love for us, simply because we're his children. It's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Like, why else would he continue to forgive the people of Israel time and time again, even though they fail time and time again? Why give a savior to a people you don't care about?
Exactly. If God were this unknowable force who was completely uninvolved in our lives and had no, like, care for us, the entire book of the Gospels would not happen.
Of course, and even in Genesis, even in the first book of Genesis, it makes it serves in stark contrast to the myths, because in the region where the Old Testament takes place, where those stories took place, there were a lot of myths where gods would either where it was everything on violence, right? It was so they had to kill another god or they had to slaughter another being, and in that chaos, the world showed up and humans just kind of showed up, and the humans were either just servants to the gods or they were just some random thing that kind of popped up. With the creation with the creation story as told in Genesis, it was not like that. God simply just said, "Let there be light." There was light. He wanted a sun and moon. He made a sun and moon. He put life in everything. He made the life. He just did it. He was so powerful. He didn't have to do anything. He just willed it into existence, and it appeared. He willed the first man, Adam, to existence out of dust. Adam was there. Then he took a rib from Adam, made Eve. None of what he did was rooted in violence. It was just raw creation.
Yeah, and have you ever read Paradise Lost?
I haven't.
I haven't either, but I've seen. Are you familiar with Wendigoon, the YouTuber?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay. He is great channel. You'd love his stuff. He did a review of Paradise Lost, and while Paradise Lost is not a canonical text, and there's some stuff in there that I don't really think fits into Christianity, there is still some wisdom to be inferred from it. It proposes an answer to the question, why is free will allowed if it leads to sin? And the answer proposed in Paradise Lost is that God gave man free will, knowing that it would lead to sin, because you cannot have love without free will. You would only have duty, and that's what the angels were, ultimately. Were creatures of duty to God. They aren't able to love him like we are.
Granted, I have heard the angels love the humans, but that's only because God loves us.
Right.
When you think about it. But, in terms of free will, I think it's absolutely true, because I believe this is early on in the podcast too. It's not so much. It's not that. I think the best way to describe it is the sense that God wants us to choose him. Because, he could have just made it so that we just served him no matter what. But A, he had the angels already. And B, that's not what he truly wanted. He wanted people who wanted to be with him.
Exactly.
But it has to be a choice. It has to be something you give willingly. It's not something that you can force. Because you can't force love. Like, you could force war. You can force bizarre changes through law. You cannot force people to love one another. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It never works that way.
Because, again, love that is compulsion simply becomes duty. And I've actually wrestled with this myself. There are people in my life who I am compelled to love and obey because I'm a Christian. My mom and dad. Now, I didn't have the greatest relationship with my mom as a teenager, and I love my dad, love him, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't look down on him for leaving us. Now, the interesting thing is, notice how I describe those two relationships differently. There's baggage between me and my mom. I try to love her. But ultimately, when that fails, because of the baggage between us, I fall back on duty. My duty as a Christian to honor and obey her. When I was much younger, my mom believed that Pokemon was evil and demonic. I had believed that because, by this logic, I thought that anime was evil and demonic. One day, I brought home a book on Pokemon from school, from the library, and I broke down into tears because I was distraught because I thought that it was the only book that interested me, and I was scared because I thought I was interested in something that was demonic. And that was kind of when that behavior from Mom came to an end. And that was one of the few times I remember her apologizing. When I was a teenager and we were arguing a lot, she once told me that she thought I was going to grow up to be just like my father. Now, the thing about that is, much earlier, she had said, many, many years before that, she had said that she thought Dad was going to hell for what he did to us. I don't know if she remembered that when she said that to me, that I was going to end up like Dad, but I sure as shit remembered. And then there was the fact that she was not at all sympathetic when I was trying to find unemployment in the middle of the fucking recession. And so I find myself very, very reluctant to help her when she was so unsympathetic towards me when I was struggling as a teenager. I get angry, in fact, because I will be damned if I let someone who lectured me on responsibility come to me for help when she is an adult and perfectly capable of doing things for herself. And then I have to remember not to harden my heart and remember that God told us that we are to honor our mother and father.
You know, one of the things that stuck out to me about the Ten Commandments is the fact that God will often say, you should love your neighbor as yourself. You should love your enemy, love your friends. But what what parents he simply said, honor your mother and father. He never said love your mother and father. He said honor your mother and father. And for the longest time, I often wondered why. Especially it's one of those guys who grew up loving their parents and their parents loving me. And after hearing all the stories of people with like rough relations with their parents, maybe like your case, for example, I think the main reason why the commandment called to honor is mainly because even if you don't have the best relationship with your parents, they are the reason you're here.
Yeah.
They are the reason you are on this earth. And they took time out of their day to raise you. And because of that alone, you should, at the very minimum, at least take care of them, especially when they're in a position where they cannot help themselves. That especially is when you gotta come in and care for them, because they care for you. And it's actually one of the greatest ways to really honor your relationship with God, because He too helped care for you. He too raised you. He too cared for you.
And He loves us even though we don't deserve it.
Of course. And even like by caring for your parents in a way, you're caring for God in that sense.
Right.
Because your parents are basically your earthly protectors, but we have God as our heavenly parent, heavenly Father.
Right.
And like I said, you know, I always say being a Christian is the hardest thing to do. And one of the reasons why is specifically because we're called to love people who are either difficult to love or make themselves unlovable through their hatred of us. And it's not an easy thing to do, but God does love those people. He may not love what they're doing, he may not love how they're living their lives, because he does hate sin. But he still loves them because they are his creatures. May not be his, you know, we're all his children, we're all his creatures. He cares for them. And so, as Christians, those who love him, we are called to be like him. We are called to do the same.
Right.
And of course, we're not perfect. We are made to be good. We are made to be great, but we don't live up to that standard. But
yeah, you can thank Adam and Eve for that one.
Yeah, I remember the one where Christ stuck to me the most is strive. He says, "You may not be perfect. You may not be perfect. You may not be able to get it right every time, but as long as you're putting an effort to get better every single day, that's what truly matters." And God knows your heart. He knows when you're trying. He knows when you care. He knows when you're putting in the effort. And because of that, he will bless you accordingly. He will help you accordingly.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up. I've talked with you about my struggles with certain sins that I keep falling back into. Obviously, this being the first episode of our show, I haven't brought it up to our viewers. And, you know, there was a time where I made an honest effort to try and fight off the temptation of lust. And, you know, eventually I just got so tired I gave up. Recently I've been trying more actively to fight again. Not doing great at it so far, but, you know, only just started. I suppose old habits really do die hard. But, where was I going with this? Oh, that's right. I once asked my pastor, and I've also asked Micah, a mutual friend of ours, about this. And as you said, God knows when you're putting in the effort and when you're just completely giving up. I was actually thinking about what makes sin a sin. Some would say it's the action because it leads to effects on others around you. Some would say it's the... no. That's a common answer I hear from people. But I think it's something else. Because this is where the whole God knows where you put and when you're putting in the effort comes in. I think that it's actually the intent to disobey God that makes something a sin. The defiance itself.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, you look at Jesus' speech in the Sermon on the Mount. He wasn't just condemning the action. He was also condemning the thought as well. You know, one of his examples is that it was told in the past to say, "Do not commit adultery." But I say unto you,
any man who looks at a woman with lust in your heart, you are already guilty of adultery.
Yes, because that thought leads to the intent. As soon as that thought enters your mind, that's technically sin right there. You act on that, that's now an outward sin.
Right.
In a sense.
It's interesting to think about, really, because it my mom has pointed out that I tend to have a very legalistic outlook on things, including Christianity and theology. I often refer to Jesus sacrificing himself as pardoning mankind. Because that's ultimately what it was, if you think about it. We, as people, were guilty of sin against God, treason of the highest degree. And his sacrifice was our pardon. Now, you know, there's a lot of talk about how the law brings death and how how grace is greater than the law. And there's certainly something to be said for that, and I largely agree. But some people need a more legalistic framework to operate. Some people need authority. I am one of those people. Now, thankfully, I learned very long ago that I need to turn that inward, because not everyone needs that in their life. Some people are much more receptive to grace than they are to law. And
yeah, I see where you're coming from, but the thing about the law is, I think even Paul said this, no one could get the law. Every single person who tried failed to follow the law because they screwed up at some point down the line. That's actually one of the reasons why we have a savior, so through, you know, obviously through that we can be saved. Like, remember, Jesus did not die to condemn the law or throw it away, but to fulfill the law. To make it so that through him we could do the law. So even if we do screw up, it's not the end, because we have a Lord that we can turn to when we do fail.
Right.
Or if we do screw up. And he'll be more than willing to forgive, because his mercy endures forever.
Exactly. And that's...
But I will say this. Let me say... Oh, I gotta say one more thing. In regards to the law, I forgot to mention this, but I think one of the main reasons why we got the law... First, this came after he established a relationship with the people of Israel through the signs and wonders in Egypt and just being with them. But I think the main reason why he gave the law to them was not only so they know how to operate as a nation distinct from the other nations around them, but more importantly, it was to teach them the concept of justice. Because ultimately, God's will is mercy. But in order to understand mercy, you have to first understand justice. Because without understanding of justice, without justice, you cannot obtain mercy.
I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, because justice is based on the idea solely of what is right versus what is wrong, whereas mercy is more so allowing forgiveness in spite of wrongness in order to correct and lead back to righteousness. But you need to know what's right and wrong first before you can forgive, because otherwise, without that sense of right and wrong, you won't know what is or isn't sin, and more importantly, you won't know what should or should not be forgiven.
Right, right.
And again, it all boils down to intent, you know. If you're repenting for something, you're genuinely sorry, God will forgive you, and the person can be forgiven. But, like, if you're saying you're sorry, but you don't really mean you're sorry, or you immediately go back to the sin as soon as you repent, that makes your repentance weigh a lot less.
Interesting thing about that second point that you brought up, how if you go right back to it, are you really sorry? I've actually wondered about that for myself because, you know, same thing over and over again, almost every day, despite the best efforts. And, you know, C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity actually about where compulsion and mental illness and, what was the term he used? You know, cognitive science like psychiatry and psychology fit into all of it. And I can't remember all of it enough to make, like, again, I can't recommend Mere Christianity enough. Fantastic book. But this part, he talks about how if someone is suffering from a compulsion, then their actions aren't entirely their own, so they should probably be forgiven. And it would definitely look, it would be hard to do because of how frequently they come under this compulsion. But these people who are under compulsions are sick, not, like, evil.
Yeah, of course. And I think it kind of ties back to my point in a sense where, as long as you keep on trying, even if you do screw up, and I do say before, like, as long as you keep on trying and you keep on working on it, you know, this kind of points to a point I mentioned earlier a while back, where, if you're coming to some God with the same sin over and over, that actually is a good thing because it shows that you're actively working on a problem. Even when you screw up, the fact that you keep going back and ask for forgiveness, it shows God you are working on this. You may not be through it yet, but you are working on this, and hopefully it'll come to the time where you will finally accomplish it. But if you're instead coming to God with a different sin every time or multiple sins at once, there's something going on in your life, and you need to take some time to reflect on that, because if you have this many sins going on at once, or if it all at once, something's up, and you need to reflect on yourself, figure out, you know, what's going on, what can I do to fix this? Because
right,
it's almost like checking out ourselves in a sense. You know, you don't want to be like engaging in a constant state of sin where you're doing multiple different things at once, because that does ultimately hurt your relationship with God long term if you don't properly address it.
Right, and I've noticed, I'm sure that everyone has a sin, when I say a sin, I mean the sin that you find yourself falling into most frequently. For me, I actually find myself, unfortunately, struggling with several. Anger, not so much a sin, but anger that festers into a grudge and even into pride. That's no bueno, and that is unfortunately something I struggle with very much. C.S. Lewis defined humility, which is pride's antidote, as thinking not less of yourself but more of others. And unfortunately, I have a very, very bad habit of finding myself thinking, when I see someone acting foolish or doing harm to others, be it myself or the people around them, I often find myself thinking, I know better than you. And unfortunately, I had for the longest time only thought to address and grapple with, you know, lust, adultery, because it was just so prevalent. It was all-consuming almost. I told you about this, Rick. I haven't told our viewers. I once considered severing a limb or two to stop myself from that one. God wasn't too keen on the idea, and, you know, the idea of being locked in a mental institution kind of damages one's theological credibility. Just makes you look crazy. It doesn't make you look devoted. But then I've also struggled with, as I said, anger, pride, lust. What was the other one? The type of anger that's a sin, I kind of touched on pride, but the part of anger that I consider to be a sin that's reoccurring in me is the kind that bears a grudge. I've noticed it's something that everyone in my family except for my dad has. In spite of my dad's many flaws, he is probably the most Christ-like out of all four, out of me, my mom, my brother, and him. My sister is so cognitively impaired that I don't really... I have a point to make on that. I'll get back to that later. My dad is the one who is forgive and let grace take its course. I am closer to that than my brother is. I don't really know where mom stands, because so often she will... I don't know. But my brother is much more rebuke, and hold on to that judgment as tightly as possible. I want to let that judgment go and humble myself and let bygones be bygones. But there is baggage between me and people, and it makes it very difficult. Some other people, though, completely fine. I'm almost zen-like with. I often find myself thinking far more of strangers than I do myself, simply because I know nothing about them. A lot of my friends in real life are not Christian. All of my friends from high school are agnostic or atheist. I think there's two exceptions, that being Forrest and Brian. They attend... I'm trying to remember. It's not Baptist Church. I thought it was for the longest time, because one of them made a comment of going to black church. I'm like, oh, they must be going to Baptists. And then I found out it's not Baptist, and I can't remember the denomination, but I'm getting off track here. Even my friends who are atheist and agnostic, I find myself thinking more of them than myself, because of course they live un-Christ-like. They didn't devote themselves to this. They see no reason to. And yet, I see that they do better than me in a lot of areas. And, there is something to be said for people who are not Christians themselves, but are Christ-like in their behavior.
Oh yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned it. There are people out there. It's actually because I was thinking this happened recently too. There's an episode of the Bio Year podcast where I was reading in I believe 1 Corinthians, and Paul said something on the lines of, when you're in a race, you got to go for the finish, right? And strive, keep on running. And then Father Archivist talked about how when it comes to races, they train every single day and work really hard in hopes that they get number one. And he basically said, if that racer who's winning to win a single gold medal is working harder than a person who's trying to enter the kingdom of heaven, something is right. If you're trying to the kingdom of heaven, and the guy who's trying to win a gold medal is working harder on his goal than you are at yours, that's something to be reflected upon. And he says, and he always makes the point about how we allow the word to convict ourselves so we can work to be better. And, it really shows, what are our priorities are. If pursuing the Lord is our priority, we should make sure we're giving it all our effort now. But, if someone who isn't, especially someone who's not a Christian, they're working harder on their goals and their passion than return to the Lord, that's something to reflect upon. You don't want it to be that way. If anything, you want it to be the other way.
Right.
Either on par with them or you work hard. Precisely.
Right. We were called to set the example for those who do not believe, so that they might come to believe.
Of course. That's part of the reason why we preach the word. But we don't just want to preach the word. We want to actually live by the word. It's not just a combination. It's not just reading the word. It's actually doing the word.
Right. That's partly what inspired me to start this podcast with you, because we are called to be fishers of men, to spread the word, and I was thinking to myself, how many Christians actually go out there and try to spread the word? How many simply follow their pastor and go to church every Sunday, as opposed to trying to share it with strangers? And, that was what first led to me rehosting CCLG's streams on my Twitch on Sundays. And then I thought, there's more I could be doing still, which is when I started commenting on the streams and worshiping with the stream rather than leaving it on here and worshiping separately in the living room. And then ultimately I thought to myself, there is still more that could be done, and then that's when I reached out to you.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, because you know what? For the longest time, I've always wanted, gee, what can I do to help bring glory to the Lord? Because, yes, we were called to spread the word, but it doesn't. But sometimes there's no best way of knowing how to do it. And I think a lot about what Father Mike Schmidt said on one episode, I can't remember which one, but he said, a lot of times people will say, oh, I want to go out to the world, I want to serve, starving children in Africa, for example. But more often than not, when God calls us to serve people, it's usually the people closest to us that we are called to help. Because, typically speaking, the ones closest to you are usually the ones who need the help the most.
That is certainly true.
I think in that extent, it's like, well, how would I best do it? And, well, for the longest time, I've always wanted to spread the word. I've always wanted to tell others about it, but I couldn't find the best way to do it. And when you told me about this show of yours that you wanted to do, I figured, hey, what better way to spread the word than with a fellow brother in Christ who wants to do the same thing? Like, sure, like right now, there's only like 3 people watching the stream, and 2 of them are you and me. So, yeah, clearly not a lot.
Well, whoever joined us, we really appreciate you being here. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Even if it's a small group, one person is still one person. There's a saying from a movie that I really like called Dinotopia. Watched it a lot as a kid, and that saying is, one raindrop raises the sea.
Very true. And, remember, when 2 or 3 people are gathered in Christ's name, he is there with them. So, there may not be many people here, but I know at least God is with us, and that's enough for me.
Yeah. And there's certainly something to be said about the layperson doing what we're doing, like trying to share the gospel. I know it can be difficult for the layperson, but I think that us being not like official, what's the term in your sect? Clergy? Priests?
Clergy, yeah.
Okay.
The priesthood.
Yeah. You may not be a clergyman, and I may not be a pastor in any official sense. But I think that might actually make our message more powerful, because the layperson can still share the word of God. You don't need to be ordained or... Well, you don't need to be ordained. I was about to say you don't need to study theology to preach about God, but I've seen what happens when people don't study theology and decide to go and preach, and that's how you get street preachers. And really, how successful are street preachers if they have the reputation they do? Really, when was the last time you saw a street preacher and didn't think, man, that guy's kind of insufferable?
It's interesting you mention, because on the one hand, not everyone is called to be a priest. However, when you are baptized, you are actually, not only are you effectively reborn, but you are baptized as a priest, prophet, and king. So, we may not be priests in title, we may not be kings of nations, we may not even be prophets per se, not in the traditional sense, but we're called to be all 3. And by clinging to the Lord, we may not be burned, but we can gain the stuff we need to do what we are called to do. Not just to spread His word, but also to help others in need.
Right.
And just as simple as just spreading God's love to those who don't know it or need to hear it. And that alone is more than enough.
Right, and as I said earlier, if you are a layperson and you feel called to serve the Lord, the best way you can do that is by being a brother first, or a sister first if you're a woman, and being a preacher second. Because the Lord said, by your actions will you know them. And what He called us to do was to not, be standing on the corner screaming scripture at passers-by, but to be servants to one another in humility. And, sometimes servitude, when people think about servitude and Christianity, they think, oh yeah, building houses in some foreign nation or digging wells for those less fortunate than us. And that's certainly admirable, and if you are called to do that, by all means, answer that call. But sometimes service can be as simple as praying for a friend who you think needs it, or offering to help someone who you see struggling. I have often wondered about how much I can do for those around me. My friend Joshua, a former Jehovah's Witness, actually, he and I get along great, but he's been struggling, and I'm trying to figure out how best to help him when, I thought to myself, he's in debt, and I'm trying to think to myself, how do I help this guy? Because, I have a job that pays decently well, but I'm making ends meet, and recently I was kind of in over my head financially because of a virus that hit my computer. I had to pay I had to pay $100 and some odd to have my technician come out and look at it. Then I had to pay more money to upgrade the antivirus so that it doesn't happen again. And it was looking like I might actually have to replace parts. Thankfully, I don't. But then also, I'm struggling myself because I need to save up for a car, and December is a month that pays less because I don't make salary. I make hourly. And so I'm already behind in my rent for this month. So I want to help my friend so much because he's in way more debt than I am. But, I've got a plank in my own eye here, and it frustrates me because I know exactly what I should do, or maybe not, because I feel more compelled to help my friend than to get my own matters sorted out first. But then, really, am I serving God, or am I serving myself? It's something that I often struggle with because I constantly second guess myself when I'm thinking about if by serving myself I'm serving God, or if I'm only serving myself.
I do want to bring up another point. Now, this is more on the secular side, but this is one that was here goes from Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. He would often say, because one of his 12 rules for life is to clean your own house before you fix the world. Now, don't get me wrong, it's noble to help other people, especially people who are close to you. But, if your own situation is not ideal, if there's problems in your life that's going on, you got to take care of those first, because if you don't, you won't be able to help those you care for at all. But once you get those fixed, then you'll be able to help them. Then you'll be more directly help them, in a sense. Like, I get you want to help. That's wonderful. That's a beautiful thing. But you got to take care of yourself, too. Don't go neglecting yourself in trying to help your friend, because then you won't really be able to help each other in that sense.
You're right. And, as you were talking, I kind of had a realization. Getting myself my car would actually help my friend, because we carpool to and from work, but we work in different areas. And I kind of had the realization that, if I have my own car and I'm paying for my own gas, that's gas that he doesn't have to spend on picking me up.
Precisely. Exactly. You do that, then that's the way you can help your friend. Precisely.
And
it's almost like you're helping. It's almost like you're helping your friend by helping yourself, if that makes sense. It's not like you're helping yourself just because you're bored. It's more so you're doing it to serve others. That's a really great thing.
Yeah, and sometimes there is overlap between helping yourself and helping other people. Sometimes the best way to help other people is helping yourself. I know that there is a stigma about focusing on oneself when other people are struggling. And, part of the reason communism originally took off is it's based on the premise of altruistic living. Now, altruism is not by any means a negative. The problem with communism and how it perverts altruism is kind of the same problem that asceticism has. Asceticism is stoicism followed to its logical extreme, where you shun physical pleasure and joy of any sort, believing that everything physical is terrible and wrong. Communism kind of takes the whole idea of anything that is self-ownership or private is wrong and should be owned by everyone. I won't get too deep into the politics of this podcast, but I will point out that there is something very interesting. Me and my friend Josh were actually talking about this earlier this week. I was talking earlier about building wells and houses in countries less fortunate than our own. And while that's a good thing, and I still think the church should be involved in that, we have actually done more harm to countries like Africa, actually very specifically Africa, with non-profit organizations, because it has killed their local industries and economy. And a lot of the money that those charities collect end up not in the pockets of the people who are in need and sick and are struggling to provide for themselves and their family, but in the hands of corrupt politicians and tribe chiefs. And it occurred to me when we were talking about that it is possible that the best way to help Africa is to withdraw these sorts of charities and nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, I think we could do that. Could be an option, but we also, at the very least, should give them the means to sort of help themselves. It's an old school thing that people used to say. It's like, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but you teach a man to fish, you feed him for life.
Yeah,
precisely. And I think in regards to pulling out, not just do that, but also teach them how to take care of themselves, teach them how they can build themselves up. Because if we just pull out outright, don't leave anything behind, they're just going to be in a worse spot. That's what happened when Europe decolonized Africa. They left the African colonies, they let them become independent, but they never helped them to become self-sufficient. And as a result, many of them unfortunately collapsed into tyranny. It's very unfortunate, but they simply did not have the means once they left to really be on their own or try and succeed. So they were in a very unfortunate position.
Right. Of course, I want to actually. This is going to sound like I'm excusing what happened in Africa after its independence, but really, people didn't really know any better, because the only story of independence that was around at that time was, you got America, India, and Australia, and they all turned out great. Were there struggles? Yes, but not to the degree that nations like Africa were having or have had.
Oh, actually, we forgot about Haiti, because Haiti also declared independence. They also be an independent country.
Oh, really? What happened to Haiti? Because you don't really hear a lot about it one way or the other, unless there's an earthquake, obviously, and then everyone hears about it.
Yeah, I would say in regards to Haiti, they were the first fully African nation. They actually got established in the late 1700s. I think it was a couple decades before the Civil War here in the United States. But I think what ultimately happened was, because they were the first African nation, I know this may sound cliche, but a lot of countries that are on the wealthier side, especially the ones engaged in colonization, they didn't really want to, I guess they just didn't want to work with them, especially not France, because, they couldn't have been in France, so there's some beef there. And that definitely hurt them long term, because they weren't able to make the kind of, relations necessary to help bring revenue onto the nation. As a result, they just kind of stayed where they were, didn't really grow that much. And I think Jamaica, I believe, they ended up getting taken over by the World Bank, and once the World Bank gets involved, it's still true of the rest
Wait,
of
hold up.
A lot of those places.
There's an actual organization called the World Bank.
Yeah, it's I actually heard about it in Luke Cage, a little things. I think because they were talking about because there was a scene in the show where there was the African American boss talking to the Jamaican boss. They were talking, and they were basically kind of roasting each other and their histories and stuff. And this woman whose name is Mariah, she was the head of this rival gang of African Americans. She was like, "Oh, you guys think you're so cool. You could have been in the '60s, but then 5 years later, you got taken over by the World Bank, and you've been in debt with them ever since."
Jeez.
Yeah, that was in a Marvel show. That was back when Marvel Television was still a thing, and with those Netflix shows, man, I miss those shows. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the World Bank's an actual thing, because I highly doubt they would reference something that doesn't actually exist, especially when they're talking about the history of Jamaica and Harlem and things like that. Because it's one of those shows where they do reference historical events.
Holy crap! It is real.
See, told you.
I'm just amazed that they could go with something so generic and so ominous sounding as their name.
I know. I kind of doubted first, like, really, a World Bank? Come on, that's not
That
real.
sounds
And
like
then you
something
look it up-
Doctor Evil would set up.
Seriously though, like I said, the World Bank screwed over a lot of tiny island nations that like couldn't had trouble getting revenue. I mean, there's a reason why so many of those places rely on tourism, because it's like the one thing that really helps to give money to the island, because otherwise it just doesn't come in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And even tourism is not the most reliable source of an economy, because what happens if there's like a natural disaster? Tourism's going to slow to a grinding halt, and if that's your only industry, you don't really recover.
Oh, definitely. I mean, look what happened during COVID when all the countries shut down their international travel and things like that. The places that got hurt the most were the tourist-based economies, the ones that relied on people coming in and exploring the place.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about a disaster like COVID is that that's actually recoverable from. It's not like a hurricane or an earthquake or a tsunami where the place gets ripped apart. Everyone just stops showing up for a while.
Oh, yeah, that's true. And then once things opened up, then people came back, and then things just kind of went back to normal.
Right. Now, it's going to be slow at first because people don't have as much money after the lockdowns, obviously, and the inflation is hitting like a motherfucker, eating us alive. But it's theoretically possible that tourism could come back in those areas in like maybe a decade or so.
Yeah, I think it's just when it comes to this, I think it's just a matter of time for people to just recover, especially the tourists to recover high. Not so much the touring plane, much of the tourists coming in. They would obviously need money to spend, because otherwise, why would you travel if no expendable income?
Right, right. Well, you know what? It is 10 till 1 p.m.
Yeah, could we go for like is it okay if we just finish that one? Can we go for like another 10 minutes so we end like an even though? Yeah, just to wrap it up. Because I actually want to share with you a funny dream I had a while back. So, let's see. So in this stream, it actually involves my future spouse. Now, for those of you who don't know, Seth here actually knows who my future spouse is. I will not say it on here because it is our first episode. We're just getting started. Just to put that out there. But anyway, in this stream, we had recently wedded. I moved to her home state of Tennessee, and we were also looking for a house because her lease had expired. So we were looking for a place, and we ended up in her hometown of Chattanooga. And not only did we get there, we actually stumbled across her childhood home, which was for sale. Now, the home was kind of strange because it was basically like first you had to go up this giant road on like I don't know if it was a hill or a mountain, but it was really high up. I remember. And it was basically just like a one-story house that was surrounded by trees. Like that's all there was. And it was a little bit on the wide side, but it was a single-story house. There's nowhere. Anyways, we waltzed in, and basically the whole house was spread across the floor. Like you had the master bedroom on one side, you had all the other bedrooms on the other side of the bathroom, and then everything else in the middle. You know, your kitchen, your dining room, your TV room, things along those lines. And we just kind of toured around the place. And basically, near the end, we finalized the papers to acquire this home because the owners had agreed to sell to us. And I remember the last thing she said was something along the lines of, "Wow, I can't believe I'm getting this home. I've lived here for so long, and now it's finally here." And before it could keep going, I basically woke up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I really do hope things work out for you two.
Yeah, thank you, seriously, yeah. And I want to get too much into it. It's definitely a personal thing for me. It actually deals a lot with my own spiritual warfare. Because, like I said, I was in a bit of a heckle for the last couple months, and part of it was definitely over that and what God had told me intimately and personally. It's definitely a very personal thing for me. But yeah, I've had those dreams,
And I will say this for our viewers. This was revealed to Rick through prophecy, and you have to be very, very careful when it comes to prophecy. It is the most vaunted spiritual gift in the church. Some people seem to venerate speaking in tongues more, but I actually want to get into that, but we can go over speaking in tongues in the next episode. I have seen things before they have happened. I have had instances where I had knowledge that I shouldn't be able to have, and usually it was very cool, but I was, in many instances, I don't like to share revelations that I have outside of people who I know personally, because as a Greek philosopher once said, a divine revelation is only divine to those who have seen it. But the reason that
Yeah, of course.
But the reason that prophecy is so vaunted is that it is the closest thing we have to demonstration of God's present involvement in our lives. To have this foreknowledge and be able to interpret it and tell people that this is what it means is the closest thing to actual proof that God exists. I will share with you something that happened to me earlier this week. I was praying because I was admittedly very nervous about doing this podcast. On the surface, to those around me, I appeared very calm and collected and happy, but I was afraid that my inexperience and lack of formal training, for lack of a better word, would ultimately cause more harm than good. And when I was praying to God that am I the right person to do this, am I ready for this, I actually saw something. And I don't usually see things when I'm praying. I will hear God speak to me, and I will speak to Him, but seeing something is out of the ordinary. And I saw the pastor the priest from Faith holding a Bible in one hand and holding up fire in the other above his head. And I also saw that picture, that meme of the kid holding fire and his science teacher watching him. And I asked God, what does this mean? And He told me something very interesting. He said, what do you think it means? And I simply said, if someone holds fire responsibly and shows respect for it, it isn't a force for destruction or pain. It doesn't burn them. It can be used as a torch to light the way for others, or themselves. And God said to me, your wisdom serves you well. That is what it means. And that was when I really became confident about doing this. I actually almost chickened out at the last second this morning when I was getting ready and having breakfast. I almost didn't respond to you, Rick, believe it or not. I was so nervous. I splashed, as I was splashing some water on my face in front of the mirror after having breakfast, I actually saw it again, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I gotta go through with this. I cannot chicken out.
You know what? I can relate to you there. On the one hand, that probably sounds very genuine, and I think it honestly sounds like something you needed to hear at that time. And at the same time, I too have been in situations where I want to do something, but I almost pulled out at the last minute. But I feel like it's those instances where you gotta act the most, because if you're having that level of fear right before it happens, it means that whatever's coming after is probably going to be something great. So I would say just go through with it, just do it, and you'll make it through. And I remember I was in one of our All Access streams, and Brett was talking about how, sometimes it's always good to take a big risk, because more often than not, when you do that, it tends to pay off. So if you think that you want to do something, just give it a shot. You never know how it can turn out.
You're right. And not to mention all the crazy shit that happened this week after we had planned to do this, that it felt like I told you about it, obviously. I haven't mentioned it to our viewers. Well, I have mentioned it to the people who watched the Resident Evil 3 stream on Wednesday night, or was it Tuesday night? I don't quite remember, but I didn't mention every detail of it. I told you all about how my brother and mom were there was a sort of family crisis going on, and how I had been in a car crash with my friend Josh on the way home from work that same night. And I don't remember if I mentioned that Rick's friend's apartment caught fire. And then
I think you did, actually. I think
Okay.
you did say that. You said that. But yeah, I agree with you. And here's the kicker. Like I said, before I left for Nashville, my big trip I did this year, was going through this intense season of warfare where I was basically feeling guilty for no reason. I was in constant anxiety. It was honestly insane. And then the fact that all this happened after the trip when we decided to do this. And this happened during my retreat as well, because after my last week's mass, my church had a special retreat that was specifically centered around preparing yourself to hear the voice of God. And the fact that all this stuff was happening, not just to me, but to you as well during this time, clearly someone or something didn't want this to come to pass.
Oh, absolutely.
Well-
And you stopped me right before I could mention the other thing that happened. When I was midstream, mid Resident Evil 3 stream, I got a text from my brother's fiance about her grandma having renal cancer. Now, the good news is that it's slow growing, and that renal is one of the easier ones to treat. So she's probably going to beat it despite being an old lady, which good for her. But
That's awesome.
But what I didn't mention on the podcast is that the car crash happened as I was telling my friend Josh about this us starting this thing, and I couldn't help but think back. I couldn't help but think about what you had said last Friday when we talked about doing this. How very often, when you're about to take the next step in your relationship with God, the devil will try to stop you in some way, shape, or form. So that just, the torrent of stuff, just crap happening on that day, it really got me. I'm not the one to, as I said in the Resident Evil 3 stream, I'm not the one to ascribe bad things happen because of the devil. I take more the stance that Marcus Aurelius said. Make sure to be dutiful and respectful towards your faith without falling into the trap of superstition. But considering what you had said just kept echoing through my mind, and how the crash happened no less when I was talking about doing this, it really got me thinking, like, okay, maybe there is actually some sabotage going on here from the devil. Who knows? I mean, he's just as intangible as God, so you can't really say one way or the other.
Now, of course, Satan is not as powerful as our Lord, as God, but he is far more powerful than us. Now, with that said, I will agree in the sense that not every bad thing that happens in your life is necessarily Satan's fault, per se.
Right.
But especially in instances when you're about to do something to glorify the Lord, you're on the path of something great, you are doing something that's going to bring glory to him and his word, that's where Satan tends to come in and fickle with stuff. It's specifically in those instances.
Right, yeah, definitely. Well, it is now 1 o'clock. You want to call it here and we can do more of this next Sunday?
Sure, you know what? I wasn't sure I was going to go, but honestly, this was a blast. I've really enjoyed every minute of this, and I can't wait to see where the show goes.
I'll say something. I haven't had this much fun talking theology and sharing the word in a very long time. It feels almost like when I first went to CCLG. I will tell you all about that story next week. I think, I'm going to, after we close this out, I am going to write down some points of interest and things to talk about next week. As that'll probably grow as the week goes on. But I'll be sure to share it with you too, so that way you can be ready when we have a more structured approach to this in our next episode.
That's fine. Oh, that's fine. I didn't mind the freeform approach to this first episode, but I do agree that going forward, we do need some kind of a plan.
I got a question for you, Rick.
What's up?
What do you think about the idea of us doing a bit more of an unconventional songs in our worship music? Like, obviously nothing too secular, but I'm a big fan of metal, and there's actually some really good Christian metal bands out there.
I know Micah talks about them all the time whenever he gets a chance.
Oh, does he now?
Yeah, he's a huge, I know he's a huge metal fan, but he has talked about Christian metal bands in the past.
Which ones has he recommended?
I don't know. I remember he did an episode of the podcast from years ago and this was back like 2018 or 19. It was a while ago. But he did like a list of like bands that you could listen to if you wanted to get into metal, and some of them were from Christian metal bands.
Yeah,
I don't remember what the bands were. It's been a while, but honestly, maybe reach out on like one of our servers, just ask people, because we have a couple friends who listen to Christian metal. I'm sure they have some recommendations, and then
yeah,
you could pass it on to your church there.
yeah. Well, I won't be passing it on to my church. The plan is I have the MP3 files saved in my computer. I'll try and put something together in PowerPoint so that we can put the lyrics up on screen when we're actually playing them and singing along.
Oh, we're gonna do it during the show.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what we did today with the CCLG opener.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I've got so far I've got Striper, Theocracy, and this isn't metal, but it is a unique genre for Christianity, a Christian rap / ska group. You ever hear of the Orange County Supertones?
No, I have not.
They're interesting because their music is this weird sort of overlap of rock, rap, and reggae in some of their songs. But
That's interesting.
Yeah, but it is all worship music. Like, these lyrics, you can very clearly tell they are on fire for God.
Hey, remember, it's the intent that matters. I don't think the music matters, genre matters as much, as long as it's for his glory. I'm more than happy to sing it, especially if it's a good tune. I
agree. This might sound a bit heretical to the older generations watching us, if there are any, but I honestly feel that a big problem in the church, here in the States at least, where, is that a lot of the churches that want to be established or, you get where I'm going with this, they tend to use the same covers and the same sort of genre that's... There's nothing wrong with it per se, it's just very, very played out almost. It's very trite, it feels like. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a good hymn. I like a good hymn every now and then myself, but I feel like more passionate and more resonant with music that's a bit more like intense. At least when it comes to worship.
That's interesting perspective. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. At least on the musical side, it's always good to have a little variety once in a while. You don't want to only listen to the same thing.
Right.
But especially in the context of worship, I never worshipped to metal music, so I wouldn't know how that was like. But
it can be quite visceral.
But yeah, I'm always open to like exploring different genres. Going different genres, just seeing how it goes. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, as long as it's to glorify the Lord, I'm more than happy to play along, or at least give it a chance, even if I don't. If it's not my cup of tea, because you're not going to like everything.
Right, and you are absolutely right that the intent here matters more than the music itself. That was actually a very early church. What's the term? There was sort of a rift in the church, not like Paul's time, but more medieval era, Dark Ages, where choir was actually getting introduced, and the church was initially against it because they thought it took away focus from God. I learned about that in a documentary way back, and I want to say late high school, early community college era. If I can find it again, which I don't know if I can, I don't even remember the name of it, I will definitely send it your way.
Oh, that'd be fun. And it's interesting you mentioned high school, because the journey that ultimately led me here actually started all the way back in my late junior / early senior year of high school, which is roughly 6 years ago at this point.
Oh, so you weren't always a Christian then?
No, I was. I was actually a cradle, the term, because I was baptized into Catholicism, but up until roughly 2016, even when I was like getting confirmed, it's not that I didn't love God or I didn't care about the church. That it wasn't really a priority in my life. It wasn't like the number one thing. But there was a pivotal moment that happened near the end of my junior year of high school. I think I told you about this before, I'm not sure. But when that moment happened, it really flipped my world upside down the way nothing had before. Like, even me being bullied in middle school did not really change me all that much. But when that day happened, from that day forward, I was a completely different person. Like, not only did I become more politically conservative, not only did I start to care more about others, I started drawing closer to God in a way that I couldn't really do through, like, Sunday Catholic school or what have you. And that's really what, slowly but surely, really inspired me to not only read his word, but grow closer to him. And, the fact that I'm hearing his voice now, which, keep in mind, just happened a month ago, like 2 months ago from this date.
Right, I remember you reached out to me because I had mentioned talking with God, and,
yeah, exactly. You know what? That's what started that Friday conversation. Because when I heard God's voice the very first time, I was afraid. I'll admit it. I was afraid because A, I never heard it before, and B, what he specifically told me that day shook me to the core. It took me a while to really fully believe. But, as time grew on, I grew to trust him more and more because, we were talking and stuff he said kept coming to pass. And I go, yeah, I'm talking to God. This is real. This is happening. And that's ultimately what brought me to you. Because you're the only other person I knew who had spoken to God that I would be comfortable even sharing this with. And by extension, not only led to us meeting, we knew each other for a while, but I think after this day, again, the same day we decided to do this podcast, the day I reached out to you. Because I knew that you had spoken to God before, that you knew his voice, and if there was anyone I could go to about this, it had to be you.
Well, I'm glad I was there for you, man, and I'm really glad that it culminated in all of this. It's interesting that your first reaction to God talking to you was fear, though. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, it wasn't like fear as in like I was scared. It's fear in the sense like, oh my goodness, it's actually happening. Because here's the thing, like I said, I've been reading the Bible for years, and the thing that stuck out to me the most whenever God spoke directly to his children. Because I think when you first told me that you heard God's voice, I was like, man, I would love to hear God's voice. I've been reading his word on and off for years. I've been trying really hard. But, like, I think by the time it happened, I was getting to the point I was reading the Word daily, studying it every day, and I think that was around the time when things really started to grow. And when I first heard it, it was a combination of fear and shocking since it's like, A, wow, this actually A, is this really happening? And B, if it is, holy moly, I finally did it.
I remember, I don't think it was the first time. I'm trying to think, because it was very, very early on for me. I was born a Christian as well, which is why I have so much admiration for people who weren't born into it and come to the faith after being outside of it. Because there's just something very, very powerful about that. And very often the people who do that come to become almost exemplars of Christianity, as we talked about with C.S. Lewis. And but when I first spoke to God, I must have been, the first time I know for sure it happened was when I was 6, and that's the first time it wasn't in a dream of some sort, because there had been instances where I'd met with him in a dream that are so early I can't actually place them. Maybe I'll get into that in one of our later episodes. But I remember when I was 6 years old, Mom had me and my brother try and sit down, and she was trying to teach us about listening for God's voice and speaking with him. And, we're 6-year-old boys, we're little shits. Doubly so because we were on the spectrum. And, I tried. I was not very patient back then. All I really cared about was my Game Boy and some Cheez-Its. But, I remember being stunned almost, because I heard a voice coming from within me that wasn't my own, and it wasn't my brain either. The interesting thing about speaking with God is that his voice is separate from yours, but it is internal. You can almost pinpoint it coming from, like, your heart almost, or sometimes lower down. Or sometimes that maybe not like physically residing there, but it sounds like that's where it's coming from. Though sometimes it does sound like it's coming from above you. I imagine it's something that's different for everyone. But the thing that I have seen most, there is a commonality for speaking with God that shows up in those who speak with him. And that is that the voice sounds like it's coming from inside you somewhere, but it is separate and distinct from your own, and it is nondescript. There's something about it that's impossible to describe. It's very distinct.
Also say this, it's also very, very, very quiet. Like, I remember in 1 Kings chapter 19 where they actually described God's voice when Elijah was trying to reach out. And the last thing on that list, because it went from like loudest to quietest, and the quietest on that list was God's voice.
Yeah.
Because it is that quiet.
Most
and
often,
it's so quiet that you really need to listen to hear it. And that's why they often say whenever you want to talk to God, make sure you're in a quiet space. Because, you have outside noise that's going to distract you, obviously. But
most often, really, yes, really... but there are instances that even I can think of where he has been very loud. One instance that I remember to this day is I was coming home. I was in not Lemon Grove. I was in El Cajon, and we lived right across the street from the park. And I had gone out to go on a walk, and as I was about to cross the street to go back home, I heard a voice from behind me that was very clear saying, "Not yet." And I only turned for like a second to see if someone was talking to me, like if someone was behind me. Because that voice was very, very clear and I almost didn't even think it was God. I thought it was a person because it didn't sound like God, how God usually sounds. When I didn't see anyone there, I simply turned around and a car just flew past me, going, I don't even know how fast. I could feel the wind coming off of it. And I thought to myself, if I hadn't turned around to see who said that, I'd be dead.
Now that's a case of divine intervention right there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because when I was growing up, there were multiple instances where I heard someone calling my name, but I didn't know where it came from. And typically, I assumed it was my mother because, like, she would often yell from, like, downstairs to call us to get, like, dinner or clothes or what have you. But there were multiple instances throughout my life, and now it's starting to hit me. There were multiple instances throughout my life where I heard somebody calling my name. I reached out to Mom, and she said, "Rick, what are you talking about? I didn't call you." And in my head, I'm like, then who the heck did?
That happened to me, too, quite a bit.
And given what's happened to me recently, I think I know who it actually was. And I think I know why I didn't get it back then. But I think I know now.
The same thing happened to Samuel as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was getting to. Because it was when he was a boy. He was in church. Someone was calling his name. He thought it was the priest. And the priest goes, "No, it's not me." But in this case, the priest had to listen to know, oh, God's speaking to him. So then he told him, the next time you're in your bed, when you hear someone saying your name, say, "Lord, please speak. Your servant is listening." And when he said that, that's when God started speaking to him, and that's when they had that conversation. And when I first heard his voice the first time, keep in mind, the first time I heard God's voice, I was in church just worshiping, and all I said was, when I prayed, I said, "Lord, please speak, your servant is listening." That's when he spoke to me the very first time.
See, the first time that happened to me, I was in the bathtub. I was about, like, maybe 3 years old. I thought it was Mom calling me. And it's funny. I've spoken with God since an early age, and yet, in spite of that, there were plenty of times where I just thought Mom was calling me, and I went off to go see what she was trying to tell me, and just for her to tell me, "No, I wasn't calling you," and I would just immediately go back to what I was doing because I'm a dense motherfucker.
Man, that was me for the longest time. Again, someone was calling my name. I didn't know who at the time. and I just assumed it was my mother because she calls all the time, and it wasn't. And yeah, I guess in that sense, I could say I didn't myself. But granted, I'm still getting better at this. In terms of sometimes I try to hear there's like some background noise going on, but like I said, it's almost like with again, it's kind of like I talked about earlier, where it's a muscle. I think it's something that we all just need to work on. And oddly enough, one of the best ways to better hear God's voice is to read His Word. And I remember because I was on Instagram, I saw a video from a guy who was like, where he talks to this guy. He guy says, "Man, I'm having trouble hearing God's voice. I've never heard God's voice." And then the pastor, he goes, "Okay, how long have you been reading the Word?" And the guy goes, "Oh, I don't read the Bible." And then it just cues to him just playing like this goofy music.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but the fact that he just flat out says, "Oh, I've never read the Bible." Most people would not admit that if they were just talking right to the priest.
Yeah, this dude was the pastor of a church. The guy sure said, "Oh, I've never read the Bible."
Well, at least he's honest.
Hey, you know what? I appreciate that. It's kind of like I said. You know, when you're in prayer, you're talking to God. Just be honest with Him because He knows everything.
Absolutely,
and He knows your heart.
Oh, this is. You know what? We've already gone 10 minutes over our 10 minutes. This has been great, but we really should wrap it up. I can't wait for next week's instance of Branch Brothers.
Yeah, but I want this to end. It's been so fun.
I know. Oh man. You know what? I just had an idea.
What's up?
We can't do this now, obviously, but I had an idea. What if we had like a segment of our podcast where we roast on bad Christian movies, kind of like Upon Fire Review does? We kind of pick apart the bad theology and point out not just that it's bad, but why and what the right approach would be, or how it could be better. Because, you know, anyone can deconstruct. It takes real men to build back up afterwards.
Oh yeah, of course. That's very true. Especially, you know, because here's the thing, because in my passion, in my hobby, you know, I'm a game developer. I'm a guy who loves making... I don't work as a game developer as my job, but I have made games in the past. As someone who makes art for a living, I can testify that it is much easier to critique a piece of art that you don't like than to try to make something that's better.
I remember one of the first reviews I ever wrote was a review for Atlas Shrugged. And it wasn't a typical internet review because I was actually praising the book. Most people who decide to review admit, yes, it's very fun to laugh at schlock and tear it apart. But there's something very invigorating about sharing and putting up there what's really good. That being said, I'll leave it to you, Rick. Do we want to roast on Left Behind for being absolutely terrible, or do we want to point out why Bruce Almighty is a great Christian film, despite the Hallmark theology towards the end when Bruce and God have a little talk as to how Bruce should approach life now that he's learned his lesson?
I don't really know. I've never seen either film, so I can't judge. So will we like actually watch the movie and then critique it, or will we just talk about it?
Well, since this is going up on YouTube, and I don't, well, actually, let me recollect my thoughts there. Since we're on Twitch, and I don't want to risk us getting muted for copyright, let's go with, we'll get the plot synopsis and we'll read that. And maybe we can watch clips of it on YouTube, but when we're actually presenting it at the tail end of our next podcast, I think we'll just go off of our notes that we take when we go over the synopsis of the film. Because Twitch is very anal about copyright material. More so than YouTube, actually. Because YouTube, they'll just copyright claim you can't monetize the video. That's workable. Twitch will mute entire segments if they detect copyright. And I know this because I have played video games with licensed music in them, and they've gotten muted.
Oh, that stinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why if you play GTA, be sure to turn off the radio, or else you'll hear just silence while you're in the car.
Yeah, now thankfully they only mute it for the segment that contains the copyright material, but if we're going to be reviewing a film, then obviously we can't, we can't do that if the film's playing and we're talking and nobody can hear us.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's fine.
Plus, if we're just going over the plot synopsis, it'll be more accessible because we don't have to buy a whole entire movie to watch. Now, I do happen to have Bruce Almighty in my library, though, so maybe we can make that a movie night on our server at some point. Because that movie is fantastic.
Alright, yeah, that sounds fun. You know, I almost forgot we had a server for a sec there.
Yeah, no, not a lot of people are in it. There's me, there's you, there's Kit Nightwood, and I think that's it.
Yep, you're about right.
I think as we continue to do this podcast and I continue to stream, I think more and more people will start joining us. I'm still debating with myself over whether or not I lock the Discord behind a Patreon, if only so that we don't get like people who want to. Don't get me wrong, I like a good shit stirrer every now and then. I happen to be one of myself, but I've seen gay e-drama, and I kind of want to keep that to a minimum if I can help it. But at the same time, if we don't have people joining the Discord, then why even have it, you know?
That's true. Although, to be fair, this is our first episode, and we're just getting started. It is going to take time to build an audience, but I think the audience is there. I think the issue is just a matter of, like, a combination of promoting the stream so people know that it's happening, as well as getting advice from people who've done this longer than we have. Because, like I said, this is my first podcast show. Like, I've been watching podcast shows for years, but I think a good thing we can do is maybe just talk to people with bigger audiences who have streamed before, get their advice, and then use that to guide our show.
Absolutely. I can't remember if it was you or my dad or Josh who said this, but when you're doing something new, you always want to be the least experienced person in the room, so that way you can keep learning from people. And even when you get experience, that's still the best position to be in and the best mindset. So that way you're constantly taking in new ideas.
Yeah, actually, first of all, that was me, and number two, I come up with it myself. I got that advice from Brett Cooper from one of her Maria's All Access live streams.
Oh, very nice.
And it's because like one of the questions she gets a lot of, because basically, for those who don't know, every week Brett Cooper will have an All Access live stream on the Dillwire Plus app. Now, to see the stream, you need an All Access membership, which is like I think like $200 a year. So it's like that. I have it, but like it is a little on the pricey side. But anyway, basically, every week she just goes on and it's basically just an hour-long Q&A stream where she's answering questions from like the audience. And one of the most consistent questions she gets is, hey, I'm running a podcast, I'm running a show, how do I get viewers? And she would always give this answer: be the least experienced person in the room. Surround yourself with people who know more than you do, because you're going to learn from them and that's going to make you better.
Right.
Yeah, but absolutely, no, that is a solid piece of advice, and now that granted, it's not just, I wouldn't say only for podcasts, it can apply to Rival Life, but especially since we have this podcast now, I think now I can properly apply this advice a lot better, since that was the original intention of the question and the answer, and like I said, it's one of those common questions that just pops up every week, so I just kept hearing it a lot, and now we're here.
All right. Well, you know what? We don't have to stop have to stop our conversation now, but I think here's a good place to end the stream itself. I do want to stay on the call with you for a bit more, so that way we can collect our notes and thoughts, so we'll have a bit more structure in our next episode.
Oh, of course, sure. I'm more than happy to stick around a few minutes.
All right. I'll see you around, everyone.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for coming.